We will praise you, O Lord, with our whole hearts. We will show forth all your marvelous works, and we'll be glad and rejoice in you. We'll sing praise to your name, O Most High. Bless the Lord. You know, God is always good. I fell asleep a couple minutes ago. I'll come back again to do another video. This is boxing. Let's talk some boxing. You know, I'm always tired hearing people talk about how a boxer's greatest in his physical prime. That is not true when a boxer can rely on his boxing skills and the fundamentals of boxing to carry on his career. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. I can give you many, many more, but I'm going to give you 3 of the most prominent examples of this. And we'll start off with Bernard the Executioner Hopkins, who later became known as Bernard the Alien Hopkins. Now, if you look at Bernard Hopkins' career, we'll just look at it through BoxRec. Now, BoxRec doesn't give you all the itty-gritty details, but it doesn't matter, because what I can show you is the first half of Hopkins' career and the second half of Hopkins' career. Now, usually, a boxer's prime is somewhere around 26 to about 32, 33 years of age. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Hopkins' career when he reaches about 33, 34, even 35 years of age. Okay? So that would be the first half of his career. And the second half of his career would be past his prime, which is 35 and onwards. Okay? Hopkins was winning up to the age of 48. Okay? How is that possible? So let's get into it. So the first thing you guys need to understand is the first half of Hopkins' career, he was known as the Executioner. And the very first fight he had, he lost. When he had his first really tremendous match, which really mattered, it was somewhere in 1993 when he faced the great Roy Jones Jr. The Executioner at the time had only one loss in his career. It was known as the Executioner. He used to take out people, was considered, this dreaded guy. Faced Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. outclassed him for 12 rounds. Made him look stupid, right? Hopkins had certain fundamental techniques. He was fundamentally sound in different kinds of ways, but still didn't have that experience to deal with a guy like Roy Jones Jr. And so he lost that fight. But he was known as the dreaded Executioner from Philly. He would go on from there to secure championship match, the IBF World Middleweight Championship match against Segundo Marcano, in which he got a split decision draw in 1994. Now, all this time, this guy hasn't reached the age of 35, okay? 34, 35. This is the early part of his career. This is in his prime, okay? In 1994, he was somewhere around, 26 years of age, 27 years of age. He's in his prime, okay? He goes on to beat Segundo the following year in 1995. All right, and now he's the IBF middleweight champion of the world. And he would win a number of different people. A notable name is John David Jackson, who was a very good fighter. He was able to stop John David Jackson in the 7th round of their fight in 1997. Okay, all this time, he's not 30 years of age as yet. Okay, and he beat a number of other great fighters. One of them is Simon Brown in 1998. He had a controversial match with Robert Allen in 1999. Now, in the year 2000, he turned the age of 30. He's still in his prime all this time. Okay, in 2001, he's somewhere around 31 years of age. Okay, 31 years of age. Faces Felix Trinidad and dispatches of him. In 2002, actually, I think in 2000 he was 33 years of age. Sorry. So he was 33 years of age in 2000. In 2001, he was 34 years of age when he faced Felix Trinidad. And in 2002, the only fight he faced in 2002, Carl Daniels, he was 34 years of age. Okay, so in 2003 and onwards, we would say that Bernard Hopkins was relatively not in his prime. Okay, this was not a prime Bernard Hopkins. But at this point in time, in 2003, he became the undisputed middleweight champion of the world by that time. Okay, he would go on to beat William Joppy, great fighter, also was a world champion at a certain time. He would beat William Joppy. He would go on to beat Robert Allen again. And then in 2004, at the tender age of 36, he would face Oscar De La Hoya. All right? And he would defeat Oscar De La Hoya to get the WBO title, I think it was. So they're becoming, again, the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. You know, once it was 3 titles, then it went to 4. And Bernard Hopkins was the first guy to hold all 4 titles. Okay? Now this is at the tender age of 36. So this is the second half of this guy's career. Okay? It starts somewhere around William Joppy and then it goes on, right? 34, 35. Let's just say from Oscar De La Hoya. This is the second half of his career. He would go on to hold that title until Jermaine Taylor would defeat him. And then this guy would jump up to light heavyweight, face Antonio Tarver and beat him. Then he would face Winky Ronald Wright at a catchweight in the light heavyweight division at a catchweight of 170 pounds. And he would defeat Winky Ronald Wright. Now he loses to Joe Okazaki, even though he knocked him down in the first round. And people could argue that Bernard Hopkins won that fight. Just people didn't like his tactics, whatever. But he would go on to fight after to beat and annihilate Kelly Pavlik. All right. Then he would have a rematch with Roy Jones Jr. And unlike the times before where Roy Jones Jr. could do him something, this time he was much more savvy. He was much more clever. So he was able to beat Roy Jones Jr. Then he would go on to beat world champion, WBC light heavyweight champion Jean Pascal in a rematch with him. First he drew and then he beat him. Chad Dawson would beat him to take away the light heavyweight title, but then he would take it back from Tavares Cloud. Cairo Marat he would beat, Bieber Shivanov, and then finally lose the title to Sergey Kovalev, and then be annihilated with Joe Smith Jr. But here's the thing. This dude is doing it at a higher weight class, and he's winning, and he's unifying all the titles at light heavyweight. Unheard of. So the second half of his career was not only studded with more names, but in addition to that, this guy was damn near 48 years of age. He was 48 years of age when he was beating everyone, and only Sergey Kovalev was able to beat him, you know, at the tender age of 48, man. Okay? So he obviously was a much better fighter than when he was the Executioner. When he became the Alien, he was a much better fighter than the Executioner because he had a lot of experience. So he was able to deal with the younger fighters, beat the younger fighters, and even beat Roy Jones Jr. Now, a lot of people say that Bernard Hopkins was on steroids, blah, 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 blah. The man just took care of his body. All right? That's all he did. And the other thing that allowed Bernard Hopkins to have so much longevity in the sport of boxing is that he knew the basics of boxing, applied it, and he knew that the policy in boxing was hit and not get hit. Bernard Hopkins used to fight dirty, no doubt about it, he used his head and all those things, but at the end of the day, his boxing skills, and this is the thing a lot of people just don't get. You know, when you get that much experience as an older fighter, a lot of older fighters, because they didn't take care of their bodies, they get out of their prime. And even when they're out of their prime, they can't really rely on their boxing skills. If you start off your career with the fundamentals, then later on in your career, you can sit on those fundamentals, and that is what gives you longevity in the sport of boxing. That's why I hate when people say, oh, we need to look at the boxers in their prime, because all you're looking at is basically you're staying only one-track mind into the physical attributes of the boxers. And you're not. Boxing is based on fundamentals. It's not based on how athletic you are. And so a lot of times, a lot of people, when they talk about boxing in his prime and he was knocking out this person and stuff, you know, they like to do that with Manny Pacquiao. Oh, Manny Pacquiao when he was in his prime. And I'm like, no, man. Manny Pacquiao is much better than when he was in his so-called prime. All right? We'll keep it going. I'll show you guys some more examples. My second example is Juan Manuel Marquez. Okay? All of these guys are late bloomers. Bernard Hopkins, Juan Manuel Marquez. In fact, they started their careers kind of late. They were old guys starting their careers. But nonetheless, Juan Manuel Marquez. We're going to look at the first half of his career. When he reaches 35 years of age, somewhere around 1997, we'll look at his second half of his career. First half of his career. So Juan Manuel Marquez was in the shadow of guys like Erik Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. Okay? That's just what it was. Alright? He had a first shot at a world title back in 1999, where he faced Freddie Norwood. And you can argue Freddie Norwood didn't win that fight, but that's disputable. He lost his first shot at a world championship title. He lost it to Freddie Norwood in 1999. Okay? In 1999, he lost to his shot at Freddie Norwood, by the way. Again, this guy was... Okay, sorry about that. At that time, this guy, he was in his 20s. Okay, he was in his 20s when all of this was going on. All right, in 2000, he faced a number of opponents, but his other notable fight at a world title came later on in 2003. In 2003, he faced a guy called Manuel Medina, and he won the IBF World Featherweight title. All this time, he's in his prime, right? 2007 is the time when he comes out of his prime. He beats Derek Gainer, getting a technical decision over Derek Gainer, and so now he's unified. He's the IBF, and he's also the WBA World Featherweight champion. Faces Manny Pacquiao in 2004, the first time. Manny Pacquiao drops him 3 times. They get a split decision draw because Marquez comes back and boxes the socks off of Manny Pacquiao to get a draw out of that fight. He then faced Orlando Salido in 2004, getting the victory over Orlando Salido, and then he faces Chris John, who is an undefeated featherweight, and he lost to Chris John primarily because of low blows, and he just lost to Chris John. Okay, he lost it. Which leads us up to when he reaches 35 years of age, which is 2007, where he faces Marco Antonio Barrera. And he faces Marco Antonio Barrera for the world super featherweight title. He beats him, faces Rocky Juarez, and beats him too. And then he faces Manny Pacquiao at super featherweight, where Manny Pacquiao wins a split decision draw over him to take the WBC super featherweight title from him. Okay, he moves up to lightweight, defeats Joel Casamayor, stopping him. This is all the second half of his career. Okay, so he beats Marco Antonio Barrera. He gets the rematch with Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao wins. He beats a guy named Joel Casamayor. He goes on to face Juan Diaz, defeats him. Then he faces Floyd Mayweather in 2009. At this point in time, he is 37 years of age. Faces Floyd Mayweather. He's dwarfed, but nonetheless, he goes back to defeat Juan Diaz the following year when he's 38 years of age. Take the super lightweight championship for Michael Caceres. Then he goes on to rematch Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao again gets a win, where we argue that Marquez got that win. He would rematch Manny Pacquiao in 2012. Guess what? How old he is in 2012? That's right. Juan Manuel Marquez in 2012 is now 40 years of age. He's 40 years of age when he defeats Manny Pacquiao. And then after that, he comes back. He faces Timothy Bradley, loses to him, and defeats Michael Alvarado at the age of 42. So Juan Manuel Marquez, the second half of his career is star-studded. He faces all the named opponents, does well against all of them, finally gets his win against Manny Pacquiao, holds his own and has a better career than the first half of his career because he's winning more world titles than he did in the first half of his career. How does Juan Manuel Marquez do this? Experience, and he relies on his boxing skill. If Juan Manuel Marquez depended on his athleticism alone, those knockout power or any kind of physical attribute, Juan Manuel Marquez wouldn't last so long in the business. You have to rely on your boxing fundamentals. We go to another guy, Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd Mayweather Jr., I'm going to use a perfect example of this because Floyd Mayweather Jr. is past his prime a while ago. Again, 35 years of age is where we're going from. Okay? Which means in Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s career, he was 35 years of age back in, if I'm not mistaken, he was 30 against Oscar De La Hoya, 29. He was about 31 when he faced Juan Manuel Marquez. Alright? 32 when he faced Shane Mosley. 33 when he faced Victor Ortiz. 34 when he faced Miguel Cotto. 34-35. Okay? So by the time he faced Robert Guerrero, he was 35 years of age. Which means the latter half of his career is from 2013 all the way up to 2017. It's 4 years. Alright? Now, the Floyd Mayweather that faced all these guys down here. So all this body of work here, Pretty Boy Floyd was in his prime. Okay, Pretty Boy Floyd was in his prime. All this is Pretty Boy Floyd. But there's no way Pretty Boy Floyd, okay, so he became Money Mayweather right about here. But against Zab Judah, he was Money Mayweather. So Money Mayweather comes from Zab Judah and upwards. Money Mayweather was not going to be able to do, Pretty Boy Floyd was not going to survive the era that Money Mayweather survived. Floyd had to change it up because he didn't have the power. He didn't have his prime anymore. He didn't have the knockout power. He didn't have none of those things anymore. He had to rely on something else. So what did Floyd Mayweather rely on? Fundamentals. Boxing skill. Yes, he had athleticism still, but he was now fighting guys much bigger than him. He wasn't going to stop them guys. He wasn't going to stop Carlos Baldomero. He tried, but he couldn't stop him. He couldn't stop Oscar De La Hoya. Right? He stopped Ricky Hatton. But he couldn't stop Juan Manuel Marquez. He couldn't stop Shane Mosley. He couldn't stop Miguel Cotto. He couldn't stop Saul Canelo Alvarez. There was no way he was stopping Saul Canelo Alvarez, right? He could never have stopped Marcus Maidana. That was never happening, all right? He couldn't stop Manny Pacquiao. We couldn't even stop Andre Berto, even though we argue he could have stopped Andre Berto in that 12th round, right? My point, anyway, is this. At some point in your career, especially later on, you got to wise up and understand and change your game because you're not going to have that athleticism you used to have in your prime. Which means you have to box smarter. Which means you have to use your experience in that ring to get the W. And even if you're still knocking out people and stuff, you have to be smarter and more savvy about it. So I really get annoyed when people talk about boxers in their prime. And I argue to this day, Manny Pacquiao is a much better boxer than when he was, say, as people like to quote-unquote say, in his prime. I think in his prime, Manny Pacquiao would have gotten starched by folk like Floyd Mayweather, folk like Errol Spence, all right, Keith Thurman, and well, Juan Manuel Marquez showed that already, and he was a small guy. Guys that could really hit would time him coming in. A guy like Danny Garcia would have knocked him out. Okay, and Danny Garcia was of course smaller at the time, but I'm saying if they were at welter, all right. My point: why would that have happened? Because Manny Pacquiao used to be too reckless. He was way too reckless a fighter. He was counting on his speed and his quickness. And you can't just count on one thing in boxing. Guys are going to figure you out. Then they're going to take you out. You have to constantly evolve from fight to fight. I'll give you another good example. Canelo Alvarez. Yes, Canelo Alvarez is in his prime right now. But the younger Canelo Alvarez had inexperience when he faced Floyd Mayweather. And Floyd Mayweather taught him boxing. But the point is, Canelo is not Canelo today because of his speed or his power or all his physical attributes. No, it's his experience. That's why I would always argue with you guys. Canelo is going to beat Danny Jacobs, not because Danny Jacobs is an inferior boxer to him. Danny Jacobs got his own style and everything, but Canelo's got that experience and that smarts that Danny Jacobs never seen before. And Canelo has evolved so that he can do different styles in the ring. He doesn't just come with the same style in the ring, kind of like Floyd Mayweather, just kind of like Bernard Hopkins, kind of like Andre Ward. They reinvent themselves every single fight. Fight after fight, they can do different things. And that's the difference. That's why I try to focus and tell people, especially when boxers get older. Unfortunately for guys like Sugar Ray Leonard and guys like Muhammad Ali, they didn't treat their bodies well enough, so that they could last longer in the sport of boxing. Guys like Floyd Mayweather, guys, the younger bucks coming up, even Manny Pacquiao, they learned that they need to treat their bodies right. It's not just run your body down into the ground. When you get older, you got to take more rest. So the older you get, is more rest you need, and that means treating your body right. It's not just going through regimens, burning your body down. And then the other thing with some of these guys that used to drink or smoke or use some kind of drug like cocaine or something, and guys like Sugar Ray Leonard used to use cocaine. Muhammad Ali used to sleep with too many women and stuff, womanized and stuff, right? And then he'd get in shape for a fight, but outside of the fight, was he always ready? We don't know. Sugar Ray Robinson was always ready in and out of fight, yes. But then again, he used to gamble and all these things, which is nothing wrong with that. But he used to also drink, I think. He used to drink. Your body's a temple, so you have to treat your body right. Even though Sugar Ray Robinson lasted long in the sport. I think he came out at age 42, 43, somewhere there. He had his final fight at 46, I can't remember. My point anyway is this. And this is my major point when I'm talking about boxing with you guys. A lot of people like to talk about people in their physical prime. I don't even know what else they talk about when they talk about their prime. They usually talk about like they don't have a losing streak or whatever. Listen, man, they're on a winning streak or whatever. Listen, physical prime is not winning streak. Physical prime is when you are at your physical peak performance with your body. All right? That's what we're talking about when we talk physical prime. And there are a lot of fighters who in their physical prime weren't doing as well as past their physical prime. And this sport is called boxing. It's not called Mr. Olympia. It's not called World Championship Wrestling. It's not called MMA. It's not called I Am Strong and Mighty Man. It's not called Punching Power. It's not called Mr. Speedy. It's called boxing. And what gets you through the sport of, what gives you longevity in the sport of boxing is not only is the science of hit and not get hit, yes, but the fundamentals of boxing. And a lot of people don't have the fundamentals of boxing. And then in addition to your fundamentals of boxing, you also have to add into that equation taking care of yourself. If you're not treating yourself well, you could have the best fundamentals of boxing. You could have all the skill in the world. If you're not treating your body right, you're not going to have that longevity that Bernard Hopkins had. You will not have that longevity that Juan Manuel Marquez had. You will not have that longevity that Floyd Mayweather has. You will not have that longevity that Manny Pacquiao has. So I wanted to do this video because a lot of people keep on stressing on in their prime. And another thing that really annoys the crap out of me is when I hear about them, two undefeated fighters coming head to head. Yeah, it sounds good for the casual fan. But I prefer to hear two fighters who have beaten names. They got lots of names on their resume. Because it tells me, if you're beating names in your resume, tell me you got experience at the championship level. Two young bucks going at it is cool. I mean, they just recently became champions and they go at each other. That's cool. That was Thomas Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard. But I'm going to tell you this. When they rematched, Thomas Hearns was beating the crap out of Leonard. Everybody know that. Right? Why? Experience. So, it's a difference when you're fighting fights and, you're green. Yeah, you became world champion. You achieved some stuff. But you're green, so you're just going out there and you're not really fighting smart or nothing, right? There's a difference when, and people talk about overcoming adversity and all that, and, it's all well and good. But when we talking about boxing, folks, you have to rely on the fundamentals. Now, I'm not saying that Sugar Ray Leonard didn't rely on the fundamentals when he was fighting Thomas the Hitman Hearns. And Hearns was boxing the daylights out of him. Yeah, but Hearns, if Hearns had the knowledge Hearns had when they fought the second time, we all know Hearns would have beaten Leonard. He'd have beaten Leonard hands down. He wasn't going to let Leonard get on the inside like that. But what? Hearns did not have that inside game that he was supposed to have. Later on in his career, he had the inside game. So when Leonard tried to come on the inside, Hearns could beat him on the inside too. So all I'm saying is, a much more complete fighter was Thomas the Hitman Hearns later on in his career. And especially at a weight class where he was more comfortable at. Hearns was a little twig, man. He was skinny at welter. You could blow on him, he'd fall down, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's all those things worked against Thomas Hearns. So when we're talking about a boxer being in their prime, I prefer a boxer who is experienced, who's got all that knowledge and experience and smarts from all the fights he's had, and at the highest level. And also a boxer who's comfortable at a comfortable weight that he should be at. Because there's a lot of things people don't understand about boxing, that sometimes boxers have to compromise certain things to just make the fight happen. And these are a couple things, you know, any weight trained boxer, they can get, you know, you can get badly damaged, right? So when we're talking about boxers and boxing, you have to look at how the boxer matured. You got to look at the weight class the boxer did best at. You have to look at the experience the boxers had, and you also have to look at also the boxers' intelligence, if their intelligence increased over time or decreased. If you want to talk about a boxer's prime, you have to think about those things, you know. And another thing, the boxers who have the most longevity, which is why I think they're the best boxers in the world, and they're the best boxers because the sport's called boxing. That means they know the fundamentals of boxing. To me, the best boxers in the world have a certain longevity because they always go back to the fundamentals of boxing. They always go back to the fundamentals of boxing. All right? As much as you think Floyd Mayweather may be flashy, or Juan Manuel Marquez might be basic, or Bernard Hopkins might be dirty, all three of them really built their stuff around the fundamentals of boxing. And so I keep on stressing this point because I keep on hearing people over and over talking about this boxer in his prime, and if this boxer in his prime fit this boxer in his prime. And I'm asking myself, what do you mean by prime? And then they say, well, you know, the physical prime. I'm like, physical? Like really? Like really we're going to do that? This is called chess, not checkers, man. You know, the longer a boxer stays in the game is the more that boxer either does one or two things. He either fades because he doesn't have the fundamentals, or he either continues to reinvent himself so that he can use the fundamentals and still reinvent himself so that he can stay in the game long enough at the highest level. And that, my friends, is superior to anything else. You know, all those little attributes and skills. You know, everybody used to love Roy Jones Jr. But Roy Jones Jr. in his prime, everybody said nobody could touch Roy Jones Jr. in his prime. I argue differently. Because I believe, just like how Prince Nassim Hamed was seen as untouchable in his prime until Marco Antonio Barrera exposed him, because Marco Antonio Barrera had the basics down pat. Similarly, Roy Jones Jr. just had nobody to expose him because everybody else was inexperienced just like he was, and they were coming up like him. But we saw in his rematch with Bernard Hopkins, when he tried to do certain things, it wasn't working because Bernard Hopkins had the fundamentals down pat at that point in time. So I always argue with you guys, I will always argue with people online, that it's called boxing, and the fundamentals of boxing is what makes you better and better over time. You may have to reinvent yourself, you may have to change up a couple things. And another thing, a lot of people talk about, you know, Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s style and the shoulder roll. I hate hearing that stupid stuff because Floyd Mayweather has reinvented himself a number of times, and almost every single fight, as much as he does certain repetitious things, his what we call signature moves, you got to look at all the other moves he's doing, how all the other adjustments he's making. And he doesn't fight any two fights the same way. You know, you're not going to expect Floyd to face this guy, the same guy. He's going to face him a different way. You can always be guaranteed of that. Why? Because the fighter constantly is reinventing themselves. There's certain signature things they'll do, but it's not. When you think you're going in the ring to face this person because of the signature moves they make, you might be rudely mistaken, because it's just all these different things that a fighter would do. Andre Ward's the same thing. Andre Ward reinvents himself for every single fight. He does something different, right? And with boxers like that, that's what makes them dangerous, right? So one more thing I want to say to you guys, right? Sugar Ray Leonard's been in the public eye for a while, and I have much respect for him, and I like hearing him talk and stuff. And Sugar Ray Leonard is talking about all these great fights that are coming. I'm not gonna lie to you; these are great fights. You know, if we can get the heavyweights together, that'd be great. You know, if we could get a Tyson Fury versus Luis Ortiz, King Kong Ortiz, you know, Deontay Wilder versus I don't know, Joseph Parker, or you know, I mean, you know, anybody, name a name, Joe Joyce, Dillian White. All of those are nice matchups. They got all those heavyweights in there. You know, we got this wonderful matchup here with Baby Miller versus Anthony Joshua. These are great matchups as well. So the heavyweight division's popping. You know, when you look at the middleweight division, it's popping. Fantastic matchup between Canelo Alvarez and Danny Jacobs. You know, Canelo was saying also in the news, he was saying that Danny Jacobs, man, not Danny Jacobs, Triple G, he should match up against my boy, what's his name, the WBO champion. That guy is, I can see his face, but I can't call his name. You guys know what I'm talking about. He should match up with that dude. It'll come to me. But quite frankly, I would love to see that happen too. That would be great for boxing. So we're getting all these great matchups. Errol Spence versus Mikey Garcia. We're gonna have I don't know. We're gonna have this underrated matchup between Adrian Granados and Danny Garcia. That's another underrated one that I'm looking forward to. All these fantastic matchups, right? And what I'm saying is, the fans, we get excited for these fights, right? We get excited for these fights, right? We may get Mayweather Pacquiao before the year is over. That would be great too. But at the end of the day, regardless, the important thing to remember is that we like these fights. Some of these fights look like 50-50 fights and so on. We're not really sure who will win. And that's all great for the fans. But you can't downplay a fighter, I don't care who they are, from what era, just because you think they didn't face a fighter when you wanted them to face the fighter. Alright? Not necessarily even face the fighter out of the prime or whatever, but just when you think they should face him. I think we have become, in this era of interactive media, we've become very bratty. You know, it must happen when I want it and how I want it, and make it happen, right? And we're not patient enough sometimes with fighters to see them get this negotiations through, right? So that's what I got to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment, subscribe, share if you have liked the video, and also you can also donate to my channel via Western Union or MoneyGram. You guys have a great one.